The Allen Line Company appreciates all of the dedicated carriers it takes to move loads across the U.S. Stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
When it comes to news about the U.S. DOT, it's usually a new regulation. But now, DOT is asking for the opposite. They want to know what regulations you'd like to see gone. I'll cover that and more with OOIDA's Jay Grimes. Bigger isn't always better when it comes to trucks. A new study finds that increasing weight limits from 80,000 to 91,000 pounds will put thousands of roads and bridges at risk. We'll speak with Kevin Stone of the National Association of County Engineers. And finally, back in 2019, Michigan decided to spend over $3 billion on transportation, but that money is almost gone. So now, lawmakers there are making a run at another $3 billion plus package. Scott Thompson talks with state expert Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Mark. A bill that would bar federal regulators from imposing a speed limiter mandate on heavy trucks has been introduced in the U.S. House. It's called the Deregulating Restrictions on Interstate Vehicles and 18-Wheelers, or DRIVE Act. The legislation was introduced by Congressman Josh Burkeen of Oklahoma during the last session of Congress when it drew the support of groups like OOIDA. The association, in a statement, expressed strong support this time around. OOIDA President Todd Spencer said a federal speed limiter mandate would force trucks to speeds below the flow of traffic, increasing interactions between vehicles and leading to more crashes. The DRIVE Act was introduced in response to an FMCSA rulemaking process announced in the spring of 2022. The agency received more than 15,000 comments on the proposal, the majority from truck drivers expressing opposition. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association's fight against California's AB 5 law took center stage in a courtroom on Wednesday. The association's message that forcing leased owner-operators to relinquish their business model presents an excessive burden. OOIDA presented oral arguments before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit as an intervener against Assembly Bill 5. Paul Cullen Jr., attorney for OOIDA, argued that California's worker classification law violates the Dormant Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution and that a district court failed to apply Pike's balancing standards. The Commerce Clause prevents states from imposing regulations that place an undue burden on interstate commerce, and the Pike balancing test says that the burdens a state or local law imposes on out-of-state commerce must not clearly exceed the local benefits.
The Pike balancing test has allowed state laws to burden and raise the costs of doing business. But there is no cost or burden that leased owner-operators can pay to keep their small business as leased owner-operators in California.
Under AB 5, interstate owner-operators with their own authority can continue to deliver freight in California, and California intrastate leased owner-operators can qualify under the state's business-to-business exemption. However, Cullen told the court that out-of-state interstate owner-operators who are leased to a motor carrier can't meet the exemption standard because it conflicts with federal regulations.
One of the requirements of the business-to-business exception is that the worker be free from the control of the business. Leased owner-operators in interstate commerce must comply with federal regulations called the Truth in Leasing Regulations, which require the motor carrier to have exclusive possession and control of the vehicle and the operation of that vehicle in interstate commerce. Whatever the scope of that control is, it can't be squared with the B2B requirement that the worker be free from control. It's irreconcilable.
Samuel Thomas Harbord, attorney for the state, told the court that truckers could still haul freight in California by either becoming an employee or obtaining their authority as a motor carrier.
And one of the key problems with OOIDA's legal theory here is it depends on this assertion, which you heard again this morning, that the ABC test categorically bars owner-operators from California's market. That's simply not true as a matter of law. What the ABC test requires at most is that owner-operators be classified as employees.
In his rebuttal, Cullen argued that point.
I'd like to clarify opposing counsel's description that you could just be an employee or a motor carrier. As we described, these are very different entities here. They try to conflate the three as just truck driving jobs. But as we described, becoming an employee is not a small business employer, and becoming a motor carrier, as we say, our analogy in our brief is that it's like baby 5 to trucking is like a law that would tell a lawyer, you can't be a lawyer anymore, but you can be a paralegal.
Now that oral arguments have been concluded, the Ninth Circuit panel will likely make its decision in the coming months. The number of people killed in traffic crashes last year hit its lowest rate in 5 years. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration projects that just over 39,000 died in traffic crashes through 2024. That's down about 3.8% compared with a year earlier, and the lowest total since 2019. It's also the first time since 2020 that the number of fatalities fell below 40,000. NHTSA says the number is still way too high. To reduce traffic fatalities even more, the agency says it's working closely with law enforcement to target risk factors like speeding, impairment, distraction, and lack of seatbelt use. A coalition of governors is expressing opposition to the Trump administration's rollback of state climate laws. The co-chairs of the U.S. Climate Alliance, New York Governor Kathy Hochul and New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, wrote in a joint statement that the federal government cannot unilaterally strip states of their independent constitutional authority. President Trump, in an executive order, directed the Justice Department to identify any state and local laws and regulations that hamper energy development and stop their enforcement. Laws aimed at combating climate change and greenhouse gas emissions were specifically mentioned. The U.S. Climate Alliance statement does not mention plans to push back, but says the coalition will not be deterred. The American Transportation Research Institute has a new report out that details the truck parking situation at public rest areas nationwide. The research, done with the help of departments of transportation in all 50 states, was meant to get a better understanding of how states manage and pay for public truck parking spaces. Nationally, it found that the average rest area has 19 truck parking spaces. By region, states in the South have an average of 25 truck parking spaces per rest area. States in the Northeast have an average of 15. ATRI hopes the report helps as a guide for states as they work to increase truck parking capacity at public rest areas. And finally, a group of elementary school students in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, recently got a real-life lesson in what it's like to be a professional truck driver. It started when 3 fourth graders wrote to tell a local driver training program, Central Tech, about their dreams of becoming truckers. Central Tech responded by bringing a truck to school and giving students a run-through. Broken Arrow Public Schools, in a Facebook post, said it's a great reminder that career dreams can start early and a simple letter can lead to big opportunities. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. Insurance is a big expense for trucking operations, but a bill in Nevada, SB 180, could make it even more expensive. It would increase minimum insurance requirements for intrastate truckers there to $1.5 million, double the current requirement. Nevada truckers should contact their lawmakers now. You can find a link to contact information as well as an email address at landlinenow.com. Next, I'll discuss a regulatory rollback effort with OOIDA's Jay Grimes, and Kevin Stone of the National Association of County Engineers talks heavier trucks. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget miss accuracy when you truck on a CAT scale. Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
With rising costs affecting everyone, switching to a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper can help you avoid expensive repairs and downtime. Save money and keep your truck running smooth with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Normally, when it comes to news about the U.S. Department of Transportation, most truckers likely expect to hear about a new regulation. But now, the department is asking for just the opposite. They want to know what regulations you'd like to see gone. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Reddig. I'm joined, as always, by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, thanks for joining me.
Great to be back.
Absolutely great to have you. And so DOT wants to know what truckers want gone. What spurred them to take this bold step?
Yeah, so this is a Department of Transportation wide notice. So not just in trucking, but across all the jurisdictions that DOT covers, really supplementing a couple of executive orders issued by the president earlier this year, one relating to improving government efficiency, one unleashing prosperity through deregulation. So last week, DOT put out this official notice seeking comments and information to assist DOT in identifying existing regulations, guidance, paperwork requirements, and other regulatory obligations that can be modified or repealed consistent with law to ensure that DOT administrative actions are not undermining the national interest. So a little bit kind of standard activity here from incoming administrations. We saw a similar call for regulatory reform and reviews both by President Trump in 2017 and President Biden in 2021. This one, I think, is a little more significant in that it has the backing of those executive orders, and certainly deregulatory actions have been a major theme from the administration since taking over office in January. So something that we've been waiting for. Glad to see this has been issued, and certainly I think as we've seen already through a number of comments, there's going to be a lot that truckers would like to see get modified or repealed. And this public comment period is a great opportunity to make your voices heard.
We've already had some comments come in, and I'm kind of curious, what regulations so far have truckers' attention? What are these folks who have made comments calling for?
Yeah, I think there's been close to 150 comments already submitted, and we're just a few days into the comment period. Do want to note that the comment period closes on Monday, May 5th. So still a few more weeks to submit comments, but not surprisingly, two that have come up already: hours of service regulations, and of course the ELD mandate. And I think hours of service, the Department of Transportation has much more flexibility on what they can do in terms of the federal hours of service rules. ELD mandate, a little bit more limited. Remember that ELD mandate was a congressional action, went into effect back in 2017. But there are some, I think, aspects of the ELD mandate we're certainly going to be commenting on that could be modified, where I think DOT kind of does have some leeway to potentially make some improvements there. So not a surprise in some of these comments. Of course, we're going to be also echoing some of the sentiments where we've heard about different aspects of the hours of service provisions. Really still a little bit too rigid in how they affect a driver's day. There have been comments about the 11-hour driving time, the 14 hours on duty time, and no need for a 70-hour rule. I think we're going to be looking at more flexibility in split sleepers, as well as this issue that we really pushed for back a few years ago when FMCSA and DOT did finalize some modifications to the hours of service rules, and that would be the ability for drivers to take a pause in their hours of service from either 30 minutes to up to 3 hours once a day to give them a little more flexibility to have the opportunity to take more rest, use their time more efficiently when different conditions, different weather, different traffic congestion kind of might slow them down. So that's definitely going to be a topic we will be submitting in our comments here over the next few weeks.
You mentioned improvements or tweaks regarding the ELD rule, electronic logging devices. Do you have any examples either from the comments or from what OOIDA would like to see done?
Yeah, certainly this notion of ELD self-certification that has been in place since the mandate went into effect, where ELD vendors and manufacturers really just have to kind of sign off that their equipment meets the rules, do a couple tests, and it's on the list of approved FMCSA devices. Unfortunately, as we've seen many times, a lot of these devices end up not working. They get revoked from the list, but that's after the fact that carriers and drivers have invested thousands of dollars into the equipment and the subscription services that go along with that. So to have more assurances on the front end where a driver who wants to use an ELD or has to use an ELD can know that what they're buying is going to work and isn't going to be pulled down from the FMCSA approved list within a couple of weeks. So that would go a long ways, not only to giving drivers a better sense of security, but addressing some cybersecurity concerns that we've also seen pop up because of the self-certification process, where we've had the FBI issue different bulletins on the kind of gaps and loopholes in the ELD certification process. We've also seen a couple different studies, really looking at ELDs as a cybersecurity vulnerability in terms of overall highway safety. So that's one aspect. Certainly, there's been also some discussions about removing potential vehicles and engines that are currently exempt from the mandate, and we want to make sure those stay in place and perhaps even get expanded as part of this deregulatory effort. Do want to caution, given the fact that, again, that the mandate was congressionally approved, I'm not sure DOT is going to have authority to kind of erase the mandate altogether.
And of course, I think one of the things important for people to remember here is a lot of the regulations that maybe truckers want to see go away might not be DOT. For example, EPA regulations on emissions, completely different part of the government. So that type of thing would not be under this particular event.
Not under the scope of this particular comment period, but we have seen some promising actions and announcements from EPA in terms of potentially overturning what we think are some overly burdensome emissions rules that have been finalized over the last couple of years. Still waiting on some more formal regulatory action in that regard, but sort of a separate basket than the DOT deregulatory efforts.
Well, Jay, how do truckers take part in this? Because I know more than a few that would like to make some suggestions.
Yeah, there's actually a couple ways, and I think it's really encouraging to see that DOT is making it a little bit easier to submit comments on this notice. Kind of your standard way through regulations.gov. The docket number is DOT-OST-2025-0026. So you can go to regulations.gov, find the docket number, and submit comments that way. You can also send an email to DOT with the email address transportation.regulatoryinfo@dot.gov. So kind of DOT is letting you submit comments on email on this. If you're going to submit them via email, they've requested that you include the subject line regulatory reform RFI. So I think it's really an opportunity to give DOT suggestions on which regulations need to be repealed, need to be modified, which guidances can be repealed or modified as well. So really everything under DOT's umbrella, including FMCSA, Federal Highway, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Okay. And folks, once again, Jay did mention the email address and the website where you can make your comments. We will put direct links to those on our website, landlinenow.com. Just click on the headline or photo at the top of the page, and you can find all those website links and email addresses we mentioned here on the show. And the deadline is May 5th. And Jay, while we are on the topic of regulations that people might want to go away, there are resolutions being proposed in Congress calling for ending certain state regulations. So let's kind of dive right in and explain to folks what regulations these members of Congress are going after.
Yes, these are 3 environmental emissions regulations that were approved by the California Air Resources Board a few years ago and went into effect after the EPA granted CARB waivers on an advanced clean cars regulation for light, medium-duty vehicles, as well as an advanced clean trucks regulation, which really put in manufacturing incentives for truck manufacturers to produce zero emissions vehicles in California. That advanced clean trucks rule also would eventually end the sale of internal combustion engines in California by 2036. And then there was also a California omnibus low NOx emissions rule that has been in effect that really puts overly burdensome NOx standards on trucks in California, including heavy-duty trucks. EPA has kind of said that those waivers were approved without necessary congressional review, and now we have seen Congress introduce Congressional Review Act resolutions that would overturn these emissions. 3 in the House have been introduced and 3 corresponding resolutions in the Senate. Now, the question on these reviews and these actions are if these waivers are subject to congressional review. We've seen Republicans and the EPA say they are. However, we've also seen the Government Accountability Office and the Senate parliamentarian saying not so fast. So still a little bit of a debate between how much action the House and Senate can take. But that has not deterred House and Senate Republicans from moving forward with the introduction of these resolutions. I think still waiting further assessment on if they can move forward with these resolutions. So still waiting and seeing on these California-specific waivers, but I think a sign that more repeal and more review is coming from the EPA and potentially Congress as well.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see Congress get into this entire thing as well. I think they've been kind of quiet so far in this entire push to kind of change government. So interesting to find out what they will do. Jay, we're kind of running short on time, but I want to thank you very much for the information, and thanks for joining us.
Sure thing, and we'll see you next time.
I've been talking with OOIDA's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And once again, folks, if you want to find those links to where you can email or go online to a website and file your comments on the deregulatory push, go to landlinenow.com. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
At Truck Stop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Landline Now, welcome back. Heavier trucks mean more damage on the nation's roads and bridges. That is from a recent study by the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks. It found that if proposed legislation to raise truck weights from the current limit of 80,000 pounds to 91,000 pounds passes, bridges across all 50 states would suffer. To speak more about the findings, Kevin Stone joins me now. He is the executive director of the National Association of County Engineers. Kevin, can you talk to me more about this report and its findings?
The report is basically an update to the original report, and it just sort of continued the storyline of the deficient bridges across the country. And every 2 years or every year, depending on how you define Congress, there's new attempts to raise the truck weight federal allowance. And every year, CABT and their partners, which we are one of those partners, has to explain exactly why this is a really bad idea. And it's a bad idea for two different reasons, but two very important different reasons. First and foremost, there's a huge safety component. I'm sure anybody that's ever driven on a freeway or a road next to a truck has had that uneasy feeling. Imagine if that truck was even bigger or heavier than it is today. And number two, it becomes an unfunded federal mandate when you allow heavier infrastructure to drive on roads and then not providing the resources for the local or state governments to be able to actually maintain the roads. If you've got a bridge with, just for example's sake, Ashley, a 10-year lifespan, if you increase the weight of trucks on that bridge, you're in theory shortening the lifespan of that bridge. And there's no funding available or no resources available to address that, sped up timeline, if you will. And it just creates a very large burden on the local governments and subdivisions of government that are in charge of maintaining that infrastructure.
What is the argument for those who are in favor of wanting, bigger, heavier? Why do they want this?
Well, let's not assume, it's true. There are corporate interests that think that they can improve their bottom line by having less trucks on the road, but making them heavier, or just as many trucks on the road, making them heavier, which allows them to get more goods to market per truck, if you will. And they just feel that there's a cost savings involved. The more they can get to market per, journey, would improve their bottom line. It really is more corporate interests that is pushing this than any other arena. Now, there are some industries that aren't, corporate interests first. Like there's the timber industry, and there's some arguments to be made there whether that, that's a little bit more, in the public interest than, say, a larger truck for one of the big boxes, just for example's sake. But all in all, it doesn't unfortunately matter. The bridge doesn't care if you're, a legitimate or illegitimate purpose of having the heavier truck. It's just going to degrade all that quicker.
What are some of the states, I know some of them were listed, that would be hit hardest? I think all states would be impacted, but there's some states that maybe more so than others?
Well, I know the report listed about 8 to 10 different states, but what I can, as a general answer to that is whatever state has a larger number of either deficient or nearly deficient bridge inventory is going to be at the greatest risk. There are a lot of bridges in this country that have reached or exceeded their expected lifespan or their projected lifespan. And if you have a state that has a lot of those type of bridges and infrastructure, they're in big trouble. Unfortunately, in this country and around the world for that matter, it takes a tragedy for people to act. And if you want to put heavier trucks on the roads and on the bridges, you're asking for some sort of catastrophe at some point. And once that catastrophe occurs, then it'll bring more attention to the issue. And I think the public, of course, would be in favor of not increasing these truck size and weights.
Do you know where Congress is at as far as, the possible weight increase?
Sure. Yeah. Just a little bit of background, Ashley. I used to work for the chairman of the Transportation Committee in the House. Now he's retired now, but so I'm gonna if this is a little bit too much technical, tell me and I can rephrase it or reword it for you. Mm-hmm. Ideally every 4 to 5 years, there's what's called the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill, or the Highway Bill is what it's called, and that sets forth all the different programs which USDOT primarily, but some other agencies, use as as the law, if you will, to conduct, infrastructure programs, whether that be grants, whether that be formula funds to states, et cetera, et cetera. Every couple years, because Congress is every 2 years, you'll see different members of Congress that introduce these kinds of bills. And there's a gentleman from South Dakota who introduces it each year. Rusty Johnson, I think is his name. He introduces a truck size and weight bill every year. There's some other members of Congress that introduce bills that ask for pilot programs. And once you have pilot programs, then you're opening Pandora's box, if you will, to allow for something a little bit more permanent. But usually those have not even reached the floor. They haven't gotten out of committee, or if they have, they've never been brought to the floor to actually be voted on. What people will try and do instead, and this happened last Congress in a few different instances, they'll try and attach it to something else, if you will. And one of those vehicles that they tried to use last time was the Farm Bill. So they tried to attach an amendment that would increase truck size and weights, whether it was pilot program or permanent. I don't remember off the top of my head. But obviously that's not a Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. That's a completely different committee and different issue. Mm. But you can add things to different bills to try and get them through. Whenever there's a government shutdown threat, the argument is there's poison pills or there's riders on the bill. This could be one of those as an example. Truck size and weights on a farm bill would be a good example of what a rider could be. Now, they were not successful. I don't believe it actually came up to the floor for a vote, but I know that there were attempts by those folks in Congress that are, advocating to raise the truck size and weights.
All right. I know the report kind of listed a bunch of different costs, but what kind of overall, what would the cost be if bridges had to be replaced?
Yeah, there was a couple statistics, I believe, in the report, but it was in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Even the smallest increase, which I believe was it was to 88,000 was the smallest increase in the report. Then there was a 91,000, and 91,000 is what you see most members of Congress advocating for, or our opposition is advocating for, and they also, I think, went up to 97,000 pounds in the study as well. But again, every single one of those examples was in the hundreds of billions of dollars.
From your perspective, what's the hope that this study does?
Well, I hope it brings attention to what we already know. The Federal Highway Administration, released a report a few years ago, or it could be longer than a few years ago now, basically agreeing that raising truck size and weights across the country would not be a good idea. All the data shows is that you're asking for real problems with our infrastructure if you want to raise the truck size and weights. It's just one of those things that I don't know of anybody that has said, gee, I wish we had bigger trucks or heavier trucks on the road. Mm. That could be a citizen driver. That could be an elected official or a county engineer in our case. It just doesn't make sense to increase the size and weights in terms of public safety. Like I said, just safety of motorists on the road and the infrastructure that they drive on.
Where do we go from here? What's next?
Well, that's a question best left for Congress. Of course, we will advocate for our position, much like we have, for decades. Congress will consider a new reauthorization bill by September 30th of 2026. That's the fiscal year 26. That's when President Biden's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as the Surface Transportation Reauthorization, which was included in that, those both expire at the end of September of 2026. So you'll see this year, you'll see advocates on both sides for any infrastructure issue for that matter, visiting with their members of Congress, visiting with the committee, advocating for what their positions are on a bevy of different issues. That would be in a surface transportation reauthorization bill. Closer to September 30th, you'll see amendments being offered by members of Congress. It'll go through a markup in committee, which basically the committee has to pass the bill before it can even go to the floor. And you'll see then amendments on the floor. We saw that last time with the Farm Bill. There was attempted amendments in committee. There was attempted amendments on the floor. They were not considered to increase the truck size and weights. But that's the policy wonk way that this will go down. Behind the scenes, if you will, there's going to be groups like CABT, National Association of Counties, most, if not all, local government or subdivision of government organizations, just explaining why this would be a really bad idea, explaining why our infrastructure is behind as it is. As you may know, the American Society of Civil Engineers just released their report card a few weeks ago, and I believe the state status of roads was D+, and the bridges were C- or C. I may have reversed that. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head, but that's only considering today's situation. None of these reports, none of these studies about the integrity of this infrastructure is being measured by having the truck size and weights increased, with the exception of the dollar cost that we know it would cost to retrofit or update or upgrade or rehab the bridges if you increase the size and weights.
Now, for anybody listening, of course, obviously our audience is mainly truck drivers. What do you recommend people do who are concerned about this? Is there anything that they can do?
Yeah, they can reach out to their member of Congress or their senators or congressmen. Both houses will have to consider a bill or an amendment if it were to become law. And they can let them know, look, I'm not in favor of having a heavier truck ride next to me on the freeway. I'm not a fan of having a longer truck on my local road. It's again, it's one of those issues where if you were to ask people, what do you think of this, that the public is pretty much on the side of those that don't want these more dangerous vehicles to be able to hit the roads.
That was Kevin Stone talking about a recent study done by the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks. Some of the key findings in the study were the cost of replacing local bridges, which ranges from an estimated $70.6 billion to $98.6 billion. These at-risk bridges represent a large portion of the country's bridge infrastructure. The original study on the subject was done back in 2023. Since then, the inspection data for bridges has been updated as local officials have conducted more recent inspections, offering a more precise look at the current conditions. The study found that a 91,000-pound six-axle tractor-trailer would put 68,654 bridges at risk. A 97,000-pound six-axle truck would put 82,457 bridges at risk. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association has been adamantly against heavier trucks. In a letter last year, OOIDA said heavier trucks benefit large carriers and hurt small business trucking companies. The association said it would cost a small carrier $10,500 per truck to upgrade an axle configuration to haul 91,000 pounds. To contact your lawmaker about this issue or any other issues, you can visit fightingfortruckers.com. There, you'll find a Contact Your Representative tab at the top of the page. From there, you can enter your zip code and you'll see a list of your federal and state officials. Clicking on their information will give you a phone number and email address to contact them at. Again, that website is fightingfortruckers.com. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Protect your diesel engine with Howe's Diesel Defender. Restore vital lubricity, eliminate injector deposits, and boost fuel economy by 5% or more. Power performance protection, all in one. Howe's Diesel Defender, available now.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back to the show. 'Tis a season for states to line up funding for transportation projects, and that often means moving money around. For details, we have moved Keith Goebel, Landline Magazine State Legislative Editor, into Studio A, and he joins us now. Keith, good to see you.
Scott, are you ready for this?
I am ready. I'm very ready.
We don't get to do it very often. What we're about to talk about.
We're talking about Mississippi. Yeah, we were talking before. We don't speak a lot about Mississippi, but they've got some big things going on there. They have just approved, the governor signing into law, a transportation funding boost for the state that looks like it's going to do a lot of things.
Okay, so you focused solely on Mississippi. I was really talking about the fact that we have a new law that addresses transportation funding, but both apply, I think, right?
Sure,
We're both accurate.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, hey, in Mississippi, early on in the legislative year, they got on board with a transportation funding plan. It helped that you have the governor and the leadership in both chambers of the state house all in the same political party. So, but that is never a guarantee that something's going to get done. In this particular case, it definitely helped out. But yeah, really, Mississippi continuing in the trend that we've seen in recent years with lawmakers getting creative as far as how they're going to go about generating revenue to cover transportation funding needs, and Mississippi definitely continuing that trend.
And to do this, they're moving quite a bit of money around and finding new ways, I guess, to fund all the transportation that they're planning to do there in the state. And we're talking about a pretty big tax overhaul. And I kind of want to run through each of the things that they're doing there to make this happen. For one, they are eliminating, I guess, income tax collection. It's going to take place over, I guess, several years. But what does that look like?
Yeah, gradually eliminating the state's individual income tax. So congratulations to Mississippi truckers out there joining the short list of states that do not collect an individual income tax. Now, it's going to take some time, as you mentioned, to get to the point where there's no longer any income tax collection. Initially, it's starting out, there's like a 1/4% annual decrease that's going to be implemented each year until like 2030. And at that point, I guess they're going to reassess where they are financially and then from there determine how much additional decreases will take effect annually until they get to the point where it is no longer is completely eliminated there for income tax collection.
So when you're talking about transportation funding, typically you're talking about how that money is coming in. But if they're eliminating the income tax there, the individual income tax, they've got to figure out a way, obviously, to make up that difference there. And they have a few ideas. A fuel tax increase, I know, is part of that plan, right?
Yeah. This was, I think last time we talked about this, it may have been a higher fuel tax rate increase that was being pursued. What they ended up getting through the state house, getting an agreement on, was a reduced amount. Mississippi fuel tax rate still in the teens. It has been that way for decades, and I mean decades. What they agreed on was increasing the tax rate by 9 cents a gallon, doing it over multiple years. So when I think about that, I think of I think South Carolina years ago may have been the first state to do the incremental increases. Missouri, I think, was the most recent state to do that. Mississippi following the same path there. 3-cent increases that will be kicking in starting this summer, July 1st. And they'll have additional increases of the same amount through July of 2027. At that point, you'll see the fuel tax rate for both gas and diesel. That will be 27 cents a gallon.
So my question in all of this, and again, the governor has now signed this, so it's happening, but we're talking about the individual income tax going away. We're talking about fuel tax increase, but we're also talking about sales taxes, I believe, also going down. So I guess the balance here, if the funding is getting a boost, is most of the money coming from that fuel tax increase? Is that the idea here?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, it is worth pointing out that in addition to the 9-cent increase, they're going to be, tying the tax rate there to inflation. So you'll have regular increases expected after 2027, whenever it reaches that 9-cent increase. The sales tax, Mississippi has a 7% sales tax. What they've done specifically is they've focused on the sales tax on groceries, reducing that to 5%. So a slight, a drop there, but yeah, just these changes to their tax structure, as well as some other adjustments that are being made. They believe that it's essentially going to balance out the money that the state is getting, but it's going to allow them to get work done for transportation purposes, which they previously didn't have. So anyway, over time, I'm sure there will be revisiting the issue there, But definitely good to see that as far as for our purposes and for the listeners' purposes, that they have recognized that there in Mississippi, there is definitely a need for improved infrastructure, and the focus is on infrastructure, roads and bridges, and that will be that should start happening fairly soon, hopefully.
Things are happening in Mississippi. Things also happening in Michigan, where the House just approved a $3.1 billion transportation funding package. I guess I'll ask you the same question as I asked you with Mississippi here is, how's this one getting paid for?
Yeah, well, the supporters of this, and it's worth pointing out, they were able to get this through the House with some across the aisle endorsement. So they're touting it as a bipartisan deal. Yeah, I guess you can do that whenever you get a handful of folks from the other side of the aisle. But yeah, looking to do it essentially like a switcheroo with some of the tax revenue that they have been getting. That in essence, not increasing any taxes, just adjusting revenue that is currently coming into the state, adjusting where it's going, and sometimes you got to get a little creative to accomplish that.
And it's interesting because you mentioned the bipartisan nature of this. We've got this plan in the House that I believe was brought on by Republican members there. The governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, is a Democrat. She's got her own plan to fund transportation in the state. And they've got some similarities and some differences. But I guess as we look at the overall package here, it looks like there's a chance that these kind of two things kind of come together, I guess, in the end.
Yeah, it is good that, for one, both the governor and the Michigan House, led by Republicans, they had the same amount that they're targeting as far as what they're trying to accomplish, and how they're talking about going about doing it. I say what the governor has talked about going about doing it is along the lines very similar to what the Michigan House has approved. So that is encouraging because I know they've been waiting years and years in Michigan, even with Governor Whitmer in office, with the focus being on transportation funding. Nothing's happened to this point. So, it is encouraging that there appears to be some progress on this. Really, the highlights of what the Michigan House approved is eliminating the sales tax that's collected on fuel and replacing that sales tax with an excise tax increase. So in essence, you'd be paying about the same amount at the pump. It would amount to about a 20-cent per gallon increase for fuel for cars and trucks there. But the reason why the distinction of doing this is that the sales tax revenue goes into the state's general fund, whereas the excise tax is constitutionally protected to go towards transportation. So that's what they're wanting to do. They're wanting to protect that money since it's collected at the pump, using it for roads. So.
We'll keep an eye on Michigan. We'll keep an eye on Mississippi to see how they dole out that transportation money here as we move forward. Keith, we appreciate your time as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine, and this has been Landline Now for today. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all you do to keep this country moving. And wherever you are, take care and drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm. I'm a veteran.
I love old cars. Fishing.
My kids.
Chrome. And I am a professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit ooida.com.